Do a review in the Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Ches. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Balak. It's a Rashi Sicha, and the pasuk talks about in the prophecy of Bilam. He says, "Meirosh Surim ar eno," from the top of the mountains of the steep uh, rocks. I see them. So one would translate this pasuk literally that he was standing on the top of a mountain, Berosh Tzurim, and that's where he saw them. But Rashi doesn't explain it that way. Rashi says Berosh Tzurim, meaning the forefathers and the foremothers, they're called Tzurim and Gavois, the uh, mountaintops and the hilltops. Why does Rashi take out from the simple meaning of the pasuk? The Rebbe explains because Bilam precedes his words by saying, "Vayisa Bilam es Misholi." This was all a moshel, and all the other parts of this nevuah don't seem to be any parables. So why does it say Misholi? And therefore, Rashi translated in a way which this is a Misholi, as we'll see in the Sikha. And let's go step by step. Aleph. Mehochein Geret Kama Pomim. We already spoken many times. As in Yonei from Pirush Rashi al HaTorah is Sumafarish Zay Pshuta Shel Mikra. Rashi on the commentary on the Torah explains the simple meaning of the pasuk. V'Rashi zogt bekama mekoymes bepirusha, as Rashi says in many places in his commentary. Und in the Erter wo Rashi bringt an Agoda, in those places where Rashi does bring an Agoda, the expounding part of Torah is as V'Rashi alein zogt. So that's as Rashi himself says, Vani lebosi elo lepshuta shel mikra. I've come to tell you the simple meaning of the pasuk, and also la agoda hamayasheves divrei hamikra, and an agoda which settles the words of the pasuk dibur dibur alefanov, things in each way. So, which means that Rashi is not going to bring down an agoda only in a case if the agoda is what settles the pshat, he'll bring down the agoda. But if we can learn the pshat without the agoda, Rashi is not going to bring the agoda. Das haste, which means as Rashi brings an agoda blois, the only time that Rashi brings an agoda is number one when it is da shverekait im pshat mikra. If there is a difficulty in the meaning, the simple meaning of the pasuk, was further that yishuv that requires a answer to make an answer. We have a to settle it because we have a problem. On base, and number two, the agoda is mahashavas divrei hamikra. That this agoda will settle the words of the pasuk that'll answer it. That's when we bring it down. Mashein kain in the erter, wo der mikra can geteilt werden. Kipshute mamish on kein schwerigkeit, in those places where the verse can be translated literally without any difficulty. If you have no reason to bring an agoda because you have a difficulty in the pasuk, bringt nit Rashi kein agoda. Rashi doesn't bring down an agoda. Afilu nit az agoda was passed rein in loshen mikra dibur alifanav. Even such an agoda that fits in the language of the pasuk, everything on its way in the correct. Rashi still wouldn't bring an agoda if he has no need from the agoda. If we can explain things, which should take shalmikra. So the Rebbe wants to understand why Rashi is bringing down an agoda, even though this may be an agoda that settles everything, smoothly. But we don't need an agoda, it would seem. Why can't we just learn the Pashut Pshat? Al Pizeh, these are the rules that Rashi only brings an agoda when it settles the meaning of the pasuk. There is a great surprise with regards to a verse in our parsha. Women gefindt as reif pashtonim seinen es mefarish ki pirush rushay haposha, where we find that most simple explainers of the psukim explain the verse literally. Und dafke Rashi, and specifically Rashi is es mefarish, Rashi seems to be explaining it according to a drash. It's according and expounding. It's not the simple meaning of the pasuk. The Rebbe brings out zwischen die erste Deburim was Bilam had gesagt b'shvacham shel Yisrael. Amongst the first sayings that Bilam spoke of the praise of the Yidden is their pasuk is the verse Kimeroish Tzurim Arenu Umigvois Ashurenu Hein Am Levoded Yishkan Gemer. I see him from the top of the mountains, and I look at him from the hilltops. Behold, it's a nation who rests all by themselves. Seinen Pashtonim. So the simple explainers of the pasuk, such as the Ibn Ezra, the Rashbam, the Ramban, the Rambam, Void, Mefarish the Verte Merosh Surim, Arena, from the top of the mountains I see them, Kipashtom, Kipshutom, literally. As Bilam is damod gestanen Efashpitz Park, that Bilam was standing at the time at the peak of the mountain, Rosh Surim, Rosh Surim. From Vanen, hat gesehen die Eden Arena, from which he saw the Eden. He saw the Merosh Surim from the mountaintop, from the peak of the mountain. I see them. Und zendig say, as he saw them, he praised them. That they sit by themselves. So Rashi doesn't say that's the meaning, that he was on the top of the mountain. Rashi he places himself on the words. He explains similar like in the Medrash. What is the Rosh Surim, the top, the beginning, the head of the mountains, which is, I'm looking at the root. I saw them, I see them based, they're anchored, and they're strong, like these mountaintops, like the hilltops, through the fathers and the mothers. So the Merosh Surim, is not literally a mountaintop, but related to the forefathers. Is in ganzen nit movement. So this is totally not understood. Favos lost up Rashi than Pirush HaPoshut from Merosh Surim Aren. How come Rashi leaves the simple meaning of the hilltop, that he was a hilltop? That's where I see them. Und Taich de Werter loit Hadrash, and he translates the words according to Hadrash. So why does Rashi not explain it simply that Bilam was at the hilltop and that's where he saw them? Base. Some Mefarshim want to explain that that why would it be important to say where he was standing at the time? But the Rebbe argues the contrary. It's very important because we need to know how he was able to see all the people, because that caused him to bench them. Base. Mefarshim Zayin and Mefarshim explain, as Leuten Pirush HaPoshut, according to the simple meaning, is difficult. Why is it important to relate to us where Bilam was standing at the time? And that's why we say, that's why we say, and the Medrash expounds, As Oich Meresh Surim V'Goymer, that also the words Meresh Surim is not the place where Bilam was standing, but that's part of his praise. Is a tale from the Shvachim was Bilam had gesagt wegen Eden. That's part of the praise that Bilam said about the Jews. Aber Leuten derech Habshat is das Klau kein Kashiri. But according to the path of simple meaning, this is not a question at all. Why was he saying that he's staying on the mountaintop? The contrary, he must say that. As the psukim continue, it's actually a necessity l'chayra to taichikim shuta. We should translate it literally. Why? No, then we Bilam hot verendigt the erste deburim. After Bilam concluded the first words, sayings for shvachim and brachos on praises and blessing on the Yidden. Had Balak gesagt zu Bilam, and so Balak was said to Bilam, he complained, Ma'asisali, what did you do to me? Lokov Goimer, I have brought you to curse, Vini berachto, and you blessed them. And Balak suggests, Lech no iti el mokemacha. Come with me to another place. Asher tir'enu mishom efes kotzeyu. Tira. From there you will see efes kotzeyu tira. You'll only see a small corner of that, but v'kulei lo tira v'goyim, and you're not going to see it all, which means that before he was another spot which he saw it all. Was the funis gedrogen, as Balak had gemeint. From this we say that Balak thought, as the Sibbe farvos Bilam had frier gebenched Yidden, the reason why Bilam earlier blessed the Yidden is given those was gesehen kulei, because he saw them all. So he's telling him now, I don't want you to see them all. I want you to say kotzeyu to see only part of them. Wo steht frier, as Bilam had gesehen them Am Yisrael kulei? Where does it say that Bilam saw the entire people, all of them? It says the contrary, but it says earlier, that Balak took him to Bamis Baal, he saw only a part of the people. So when did he Bilam see all the people? Is when mitayz the werter kimerosh sudim ar enu kipshute. If we should translate literally, I've seen them from the top of the mountain. It was keshalanit. Then it's not a question. When did he see all of them? Bilam aleinot has gesagt Bilam himself said it and emphasized it. Merosh sudim ar enu. I was from the top of the mountain. I saw them. Unochmer. Not only did he say that, das gesagt, als hascholo bir beremes zu the brachas shebem shechadibur. He said this as an opening and explaining, at least by way of a hint, the blessing that he's saying in continuation, that I see them all. And when you see them all what he can do is bless them. That's how we know that now that he saw them, some didn't see them all. That's if we translate the Rosh Surim at the top of the mountain, he saw them all. So it turns out, as Dafke Leuten Pirush HaPoshut, that it's specifically, according to the simple meaning, is Kimerosh Surim Ar Eno, in Kimerosh Surim Ar Eno, if we translate it from the mountaintops, I see them, is moving the Hamshtab Psukim. We know the flow of the Psukim. So he went to the mountaintop, he saw them all, and then he blessed them. And then Balak says to him, I'll take you to a place, you'll see part of them, maybe you'll curse me them for, maybe you'll succeed to curse them. So you see that Meresh Surim should be seemingly translated as the mountaintop from where he saw the Yidden. In Ois Gimel, the Rebbe is going to point out that there's actually a change in Rashi from the words, the way they are in the Medrash. The Medrash refers to that the fathers and the mothers Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, so Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, they are the Tzurim, they are the mountaintops, and they are the hilltops. But Rashi says no. If you look at the language in Rashi, Rashi changes it. Rashi says that the Yidden are the Tzurim Ugvois. They get their strength from the obviously was. That's what I say. Gimel. Euch darf man verstehen Lashon Rashi. We also need to understand Rashi language. The Moker from Pirush Rashi, the source for Rashi's commentary, as der Posuk redt wegen der Gruntigkeit und Starkheit von Eden mitzad the Ovis v'Imois. This Posuk is talking about the thoroughness and the strength of the Eden because of the father and the mothers. So there is an association to the being grounded and strengthening because of the Avzimos. There's a change the way Rashi says it in the Medrash. Is in Medrash, aber dort is the Lashon. Here we're talking about the strength of the Yidden is because of the father and mothers. But in the Medrash, the language is that they are the strength, they are the Harimut was. Medrash dort is the Lashon Kimerosh Surim, who is the head of the mountains, Elu Aves, that's the forefathers. Umigvois and the hilltops, Elu Imois, those are the mothers. Und der Yisod von Rashi is, what's the basis for this expounding that they're called hills, mountains, and hilltops? Und Rashi does was we gefind, that fact as we find, as the others when angerufen become a psukim that the forefathers are called in several verses Horim. They're called mountains, or they're Tzur. Tzur. Wie steht in Yeshaya, as it says in Yeshaya, Habitu el Tzur chutzaftem. Look to the rock, to the mountain that you were carved out. Habitu el Avram Avichol Goymer. Look to Avram Avichol Goymer. That's the Tzur, which you come from. So the Medrash, we understand, he translates Tzur as going on the forefather and the voice going on the mothers. So, isn't it move on? So it's not understood. Aleph Avos Zokt Rashi dem Loshen Ali Yidei Ovis V'Imois. Rashi says through the fathers and the mothers. Nit V'Loshen HaMedrash Elu Ovis Elu Imois. Doesn't use the language of these are the fathers, these are the mothers, that the voice and the Harim and voice are fathers and mothers. And base, Kavos break nit Rashi Keinarayis from Psukim. Why does Rashi not bring any evidence, proof from any verses? At Tzurim is Akinu of Ovis, that Tzurim is a description of the father. Was dos volt mechase given l'chol apachos. This would at least strengthen us that Rashi's masim oich mit pshuto shel mikra, that this expounding is also fits with the simple meaning of the pasuk, which we find that the language of Tzurim or Gavois refers to the Ovis, but Rashi doesn't say that. The Rebbe says Ober Kadaikis Shapir Beloshon Rashi, but when you look in closely, well, into Rashi's language, his muchach is evident adrabe. On the contrary, not only does he not quote the Medrash as it's stated, but he wants to change from the Medrash. As eristake oisum l'shanes, his intent is to change. To mefarish zayin nit vider Medrash, not as the Medrash did, as rosh tzurim elu ovis u'gvois elu imois, that the head of the mountains is the fathers and the hilltops is the mothers. Nor Rashi is medagdel b'lashono, but Rashi specifically uses his language. Ani mistakel b'rishisom. I look in their beginnings, ubitchilas shorasheim, and in the beginning of their roots, vani roya oisom. And I see them. Who is them? Not the forefathers, not the mothers. The Eden. Miyusodim, that they are anchored in Zeire Shoroshim, in their roots, Vachazokim, and they're strong, Kitsurim Ugvois Alolu, like these mountains and hilltops. That's referencing the Yidden. That's not the Ovis, those haste, which means as the Eden Zainen di, Vachazainen Chazokim, Vitsurim Ugvois. It's the Yidden that are the ones that are strong, like the hilltops and the mountains. Und die Ovis wie immer seinen der Merosh Zurim. The father and the mother, they're the head, the top of them. We come from there. The Reishis und Shoroshim from Eden. They're the beginning and the roots of Eden. Was machen die Eden Zurim Chazokim? They're the ones that make Eden these mountains and strong. That's the forefather, but it's not that they're the strong. The Yidden are the strong. And the Far is Rashi Medayik, and that's why Rashi is very precise. He says, Al Yidei Oves V'imois, through the father and the mothers. Nit as Tzurim Ugvois Zainen the Oves V'imois. It's not that the mountains and hilltops are the father and the mother, nor as Vern Atzur, them Chayzek, but to become a mountain, getting that strength bakum the Eden get them durch zeh roish v'shoroshim, through their head and their roots, the Ovis Mois. That makes them, gives them the strength. That's the shirish. As bleib, that's what. Okay, so Rashi is not going along with the Medrash, but why? Why does Rashi Taka change it and not learn like the Medrash that Surim and the voice are the father and the mothers, not the Yidden because of the powers that they get from the father and mothers. As Bleibtov and it Musbar, it's still not understood. How gufa time boy. This itself needs reasoning. The Baal as Saivi learned Rashi need kipshute. Since Rashi in any event doesn't learn it literally, nor as Miresh Surim bat Seichel die Starkheit in Verbindung mit Ovezimos, but it is that the head of the mountain, this just describes the strength, how it is tied to the father and mother. But it's not the father and the mother that are Tzurim and Gvois. It just tells you how the Yidden get their strength. So in that case, we're not even saying that Tzurim Ugvois means the father and the mothers, as we have evidence from other psukim. So why does Rashi, Favos is Mishana from Medrash? So why does Rashi change from the Medrash? When I start to learn as Tzurim mean the Ovis, instead of learning that Tzurim means the forefathers. We gebracht Vrier is Dosa Mikra Mole as brought earlier, that Tzurim could mean the father. The Pasuk says, Tzur Chutzavtem Yishaya wrote the Pasuk. Habitu El Tzur Chutzavtem Avraham Avichem. So we've referred to the mountain you were carved out as Avraham Avichem. That's what the pasuk says. So Izer Mefarish as Tzur voice, Batzitzich to Eden. That Tzur voice refers to Eden. And the Avizumo is an employees Rosh Tzurim. And the father and the mother are just the head, the top. So why does Rashi do that? Dalit is there's Biur Vazeh B'Pashtus. The Rebbe was going to explain why Rashi has to explain that it's not the Ovis and it's not the Pashtu Pshat that he was on the mountains, because there has to be something here, a moshel, and the only moshel that Rashi can find is that the Yidden are called a mountain and a hilltop based on their strength. Not that Avraham, not that the others are called that, because that wouldn't be a moshel, that would be finished. Let's look inside. Al Sagdoma to Divrei Bilam, as an introduction to Bilam's words. Zog Posik Vayisom Misholoi Vayevim. So he carried a parable. He carried his parable. Bilam carried his parable, and he said, The word Misholei is Rashi don't need mefarish. Rashi doesn't explain what Misholei means. Was der fun is movement. That's from that we understand as Loit Rashi is Purushe Pshute Kimashmo. According to Rashi, the meaning is literally as it understand a moshel. Moshel is a parable. Abilam go geret mit a moshel. Abilam was talking here with a parable. In the very simple meaning of a moshel, a parable. As we say, moshel l'mahadovademe. For example, this can be compared to something else in a parable. And as we see, as in Yedere von die zweite dicke dreimal rate von Bilam. In all of the following 3 times of the words of Bilam, wo es steht euch, also it says, Vayiso Mishole, he raised this parable, hat Meshaber given Eden nutzendig dabei Misholim. So he praised the Yidden by using parables. Kisoy afois re'em, kilovi, uchari. So these are parables of the various animals, and then kanecholim, kaganim, like the rivers, like the gardens, dorach koichov, like the star. He uses all kinds of metaphors and parables to describe what he's trying to say. That means a moshel. Every time that word a moshel means a parable. So the question becomes, welche von seinen Deburim seinen gewähnt b'derech moshel? Which of his sayings were in the way of a parable? Over here. So, Ascholos Dvorov, the beginning, his opening words of Bilam, min arom yanecheni bolok goimer, from Aram Balak led me, and Lecho to tell me goimer to go curse them. What could I curse? Isn't it kemoshel? That's not a parable. No, those are dvorim kavios. These are things that happen. Und weiter dike divrei bracha v'shevach, and the following words of blessing and praise. Hein am levodod yishkon. It was a nation sits all alone. By going lo yischashiv, he doesn't count amongst the nations. These are not a parable. Those are facts. So what is the parable that he's saying over here? And the Rebbe wants to caution now, say, well, we also find he refers to Mimona Afar Yaakov. And the Rebbe is going to say that Afar Yaakov, the dust of Yaakov, is actually not a Moshul Mispareve Yisrael. That verse is also not a Moshul, as the Rebbe is going to explain. We are left basically without any Moshul over here. And the only Moshul that Rashi can come up with, that the Rebbe will explain, is to say that that he sees them from the mountains, from Mikvoy Sashurenu. This is the Moshul. We'll see inside. So the Chayre is going to say, as Mishole Basitzer to the Weiter, the Keverter, to the following words that continue in the words of Bilam. He says, Mi mono afari Yaakov. Who can count the dust of Yaakov? What does it mean, the dust of Yaakov? Who can count it? Mefarshim Taichim. So Mefarshim translated, Ados meint, this means, as to leave them ribui otzum fun in, because there is such an enormous amount, a quantity of Yidden, kemas in itself, you can't count them. So this would be, by way of example, offer. Just like you can't count dust, you can't count the sand, you can't count the Yidden. Steht in Pasuk früher, the Pasuk says earlier, I will make your seed like the dust, the sand on the ground. You can't count it. If anybody can count your sin, you should all be counted. Since we can't count them, so maybe when he said ka'afar, he was talking about a parable, the multiple. That's why he's masholi. That's the mashul that he compared the Yidden to this sand. But Rashi doesn't learn that that's the meaning. Rashi himself rejects this interpretation in Afar that they're so numerous that you can't count. If Mimono Afar Yaakov, on the verse, who can count the Afar Yaakov? Bringt Rashi the Pirush Rishon. Rashi in his first commentary says, Kidakar Gumai, like the Targum says, the Adkaya, the base Yaakov. Adkaya means the small children. Who can count the sand, the small of the Yidden? That's Adkaya, the base Yaakov. Small children of base Yaakov. Thus says, as the word Afar Yaakov in them pasuk, the word the sand of Yaakov in this pasuk is not an oizdruk shel moshul of Yidden. It's not an expression of a parable. Oh, they're so numerous. So to describe, to point out their being so many. Not as main bepashtus, but it means the kleine Kinder von Yaakov. Adkaya means the small children of Yaakov. Mitzad them, why are small children called offer? Mitzad them was offer is stoib. Offer is dust. Loshen ab for ruins. And the far, very thin, far bonim daki, children that are thin, little children, ungerufen b'shem offer. We call them offer. We call them thin. They're small, thin. Another reason, while offer in them pasuk, offer in this pasuk is Meloshon oifer ha'elim, which means the young of the rams, was made bachrus, which means young. But in any event, either way, according to this type of offer, we're not giving a mushal, we're just referring to the small children. We're talking about adkaya, but we're not saying some parable over here. That's according to the first pshat Rashi. How much more so, according to this second interpretation of Rashi, there is no number, there's no accounting of mitzvahs that they do with the sand. Mimono, Afar Yaakov, who can count the mitzvahs that are related to offer? Kisudam, the offer, the various different mitzvahs that we do with offer. But Sloyd Dem Pirush, according to that Pirush, is the Taich from offer, but Muvone HaPoshat. So here the translation of offer is literally sand. Offer mamish, actual sand. Nor Gemein, the mitzvahs is Mekayim offer. This interpretation, we're talking about mitzvah that we do with sand, but sand is not a parable. That's literal. So, Mi Mono Afar Yaakov cannot be the parable. Now, Valderech Zeh, as Rashi himself rejects it by saying that Afar means that Kaya and the second pshat, both pshatim, means offer literally. So that's not the mashal. Valderech Zeh is an diverter mispar es Reva Yisrael. Count the number of Reva Yisrael. What is Reva Yisrael? They're nitke mashal. It's also not a mashal. Leuten ersten Pirushin Rashi Yapia Targum. According to Rashi's first commentary, according to the Targum, Meintes Arba de Golim. That means Reva means the four flags, the four groups as they were traveling. You can count the Reva, the following four daggers. Well, Leuten Zweitem Pirush, it means Revi Oiseihem, which is, the way that they give birth. The einzige Werte zwischen Divrei Bilam, welche können ausgeteilt werden al derech hamoshel, the only words amongst the words of Bilam that can be translated as in a parable, seine kimerosh tzurim varenu migvois hashoreh. These are the only words that one can translate in a parable. And from that reason, Rashi doesn't want to translate it literally, but in a way of a parable. Ani mistakil bereishisom kulam. I look at their beginnings. I look at their beginnings and I see they are rounded and they're strong, like the mountains and these hilltops. That's a mushal for them. Hey, and this is also the reason the Rebbe says, well, Rashi can't learn like the Medrash, that this refers to the others, then that wouldn't be a parable. That would be the pshat of tsurim and gavois. Hey, al pizeh, as Rashi's pirush is meyused of dem hechrich zu teichen merosh tsurim als moshe. That what forces Rashi to translate merosh tsurim as a moshe. That it means it's a parable is because he says vayisam sholei that recht werden farvos Rashi cannot learn with the Medrash. We also understand why Rashi cannot learn like the Medrash. As merosh tsurim elu ovis, that this refers to the ovis. Al derech wie in andere psukim as similar to other psukim. But the others when angerufen zur horim, where they're called zur horim, why Rashi can't learn like the Medrash. Or wie bald as der word surim is lefi ha-medrash hakinui, sin the word surim, according to the Medrash, it's a description. In Torah of the others, the Torah refers to them as surim. He says, doch nit kein moshel, then that's not a parable. Osignoni is that dugma von an ander Zach. That would be an example for something else. Here, they're called surim. But it's another name for them. They're called sur. The Rebbe muss Rashi lernen, as the Werter Surim und Gevuos, that the word Surim und Gevuos of Bilam gesagt als Moshel of the Starkheit von Yid. He turned it as a parable for the strength of Yid. As it's eine Chazokim, Kitsurim und Gevuos alone. That their strength is like these mountains and these hilltops. The Gashmizik Kitsurim und Gevuos, like physical, bringing a parable from the physical hilltops and mountains for their strength, and it's based at the Merosh Surim. So basically, the Rebbe says we have to come up with a moshel, and the only moshel we can come up is a Merosh Surim. That's why he said Vayisam Misholoi, and that's why Rashi can't learn the pastures that he was on the mountaintop. Rashi can't learn that it means the others, because we need a moshel. And the mashal is for the strength of the Yidden based on the Rosh Tzur. The Rebbe is now going to say there's another pasuk which we have a similar interpretation, which also seems a little bit Rashi's interpretation is against the simple meaning of the pasuk, and Rashi changes around. And this, according to this line of thinking, Mishaloi, that will be answered as well. According to this, we can explain noch pirush Rashi Tomua, another seemingly Rashi which is surprising. And Besium Nevuas Bilam, this is in the end of the prophecy of Bilam. Of Reishis Goyim Amolig, Reishis Goyim Amolig, the first of the nation is Amolig. Is Rashi Mefarish? How does Rashi, what does it mean, the first of the nation? Is who Kodem as Kulam Leilochem Be Yisrael? He preceded everyone, he was the first one to wage war against the Yidden. V'chein Tirgem Onkelos, and also the Onkelos translates this way, that he is the first one that started up. V'achrisai, the pasuk says, Lehei Oved B'yodom, and in the end, he will be lost by their hands. He was lost by the Yidden. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Timche Ezechan Amolik. You should erase this remembers Amolik. So what's the problem in this Rashi? First of all, why are we translating here that it means the first one that started up with the Yidden versus saying that he was the head, the most important of all the goyim? Darf man verstehen, was is der Hechlech Haderech Hapshat zu teach? What is the forces us, according to the simple meaning, to translate? Reish is goyim Amalek, the first nation Amalek, Kodam es kulam lilochem b'Yisrael, he preceded them all to wage war against the Yidden. Why can't we say it literally in the Ramban? As Amalek is Bereisho Amim Yechoshe. He's considered the top of the nations. Ki geboidim hoyu, they were mighty, they were strong. They were men of warriors for war. So Reishis would mean Reishis Goyim, he's the top. Reishis Losh Meshubach, the praiseworthy one, the best. When you find the Pirush Rashi Le'il, Rashi already teaches the word Rosh. Somim Rosh means Chashuvim. Important Besomim, when you made the Ketores over there, Rashi said Besomim Rosh. Base. Another question is, Favos bringt Rashi the Raya Vachrisa ad the Eved, that at the end he's going to be lost by the Yidden from the Mshpeter de Komposik, Timcha Zecher Amalek, that you will erase the members of Amalek, nicht von Frir de Komposik, not from the Posik that precedes that, Mochoi Emcha Zecher Amalek, I will erase Amalek. Now, it fits actually in the Rashi. Rashi brings the Posik because Rashi uses the language that the Yidden are going to destroy Amalek. Reish is going Amalek. V'acharisoi ad the Ovid. They're going to destroy them. How do they? It says Timcha. Emcha means the Eberster. So, but the question is, why does Rashi have to say that the Soif, that the Yidden will erase them? In the end, they will be erased, and then he can bring the Pasuk Mocha Emcha. The Pashtus is the time that Rashi brings the Pasuk Timcha, while Rashi will bring an Araya as Vachrisei la'ovid biyodom, that in the end he will be lost by the hands of the Yidden. Durch Yidden, through Yidden. And the far bringt the Raya from Timcha as Zecher Amalek. So he brings the proof, you will erase, because the Yidden will erase. Aber how Gufa is not verstanden? It was not understood. Why does Rashi have to say Achrisei la'ovid biyodom, not Achrisei to be lost? Pavos darf Rashi zulegen dem Wort biyodom, and sein Muchrech zu bringen, and then he has to bring the proof for später dicke Posik Timcha Goimer from the second Posik that says Timcha. In Posik steht doch nur Vachrisai Adei Ovid. It says at the end he'll be lost. Nicht der Monen dig durch Wemmen. Doesn't say who is going to cause him to be lost, that it was the Yid. Kenes Menin Hashem, Moche Emche, could be either one. So why does Rashi add the Yid? So the Maral is Mevayer. Maral explains, as men can nicht sagen, as a David mean ba'atzmei. We can't say a David means on their own. Balim kein ma'in yonei al reishis goyim amalek. So what does it have to do with the beginning of the pasuk? We say reishis goyim amalek. We're talking about Amalek. We're talking about Amalek. So why do we have to say? Why do we have to say? So because Rish Amalek is the war. So how is he going to get lost by the war with the Yid? Otherwise, getting lost B'chlal is not connected to the beginning. That's what the Maral says. But the Tiritz is l'chayrin, it must be. This answer is not sufficient. The Menolon ha'hecherech. Because who tells us that we have to say, as Kishem v'reishis goyim is b'shaychet to the milcham mitin, just as the reishis goyim has to do because of the war that it had with the Yidden, that's what we have to say, that in the end, when he's going to be lost, we also have to say Durch the Eden. Why does it have to be so? We can say simply, as a Yos HaMolek is given der erste zu Milchama haben mit ihm, since he was the first one to wage war against him. So his punishment will be that he'll get lost. Doesn't have to be that the Yidden will have him lost. As wird die ganzen Levet werden. Al derich wie steht weiter, Sichos to another, similar it says with regards to another nation, they'll also get lost. So why do we have to say, the Maral says it has to be through Yidden, and therefore we have to say Mochei Tipcha. Why? He'll just get lost because he started off, as we say with regards to another nation, over there it doesn't say he started up with him, that's what will get lost. So over here he'll be lost. Why does it actually say B'yodom Adavke through Yidden? The Rebbe explained this is explanation is similar to what we explained in the previous pasuk because of Misholi. The pasuk is Magdim Vayar es Samolek Vayisu Misholi Vayem Reish. He saw Amalek, so he raised this parable and he says Reish. Is by Rashi kosher, so Rashi has a difficulty. The Chayre is in them pasuk and it took a moshel. In this verse, there is no moshel. The Werte Reish is Goyim Amalek. We should translate it as Seine Poshetum Klor. This is very simple and very clear. As Amalek is the Reishis. He is the Erster, he's the first. Meshubach is the most important in Starkheit, in strength von alle Goyim. And Ve'acherizei, and sein Soviet, sein Adiyah, will be lost. The Far is Rashi Mefarish. No, it has to be a moshel here. The Reish is going Amalek who kodem es kulam lilochem b'Yisrael. What means the beginning of the nation Amalek is meaning he started to wage the war against the Yid. As Reish is goyim main don't need to move on that portion over here. It doesn't mean simply he's the head of all the nation. No, das is a toyer was bringt a ruis, but rather this describes a description that expresses b'derech moshul and anders Amalek. He brings on something different, not the fact that he is the partner, he's the strong one. From the Werte, something which is not in the simple meaning from the words. Reish is goyim is merames. The Reish is goyim hints. Those was who called them as kulam lelochem b'Yisrael. The fact that he went ahead of everybody to wage war against the the far past the roof the loshem by Yisrael b'Sholoi by Yomer. This is the parable that he raised Bilam, and he said, Reishis, the one who started, he went first to wage war against Yidden. And the mit is euch move on der Hemshech in Rashi. And now we also understand the continuation in Rashi. That since we're saying, in the end he'll be lost in their hand. The Baal, as Reishis Goyim, Amalek is a moshel, was weist af an Inyan Meyuchad, since it's a moshel that shows on something special that he started the war behind the B'Shaichas to Eden, something special as it connects to the Eden, that his Reishis was starting up with Eden, the first to start up with Eden, is mistaber, so it also makes sense, logical as that Hemshech, that also the follow-up, is mevone, nit nor kipshut as ein soif. It's also, in the end, doesn't mean just his end. Nor a moshel to undeiten auf an Inyan Chodesh, to teach us, to point to something new. Und wie bald as der movement von Reishis v'Achrise is a moshel, since it's both the beginning and ends a moshel, leidt sich zu sagen, as beide sein a moshel, b'sheiches zum selben Inyan, that they're both a moshel for the same concept, what's taking place here. Is the Reishis and Achris from an Inyan. Melchames Amalek v'Yisrael. It's the beginning and the end of the same Amalek v'Yisrael. So just like the Reishis Goyim, he started up, so it's also a mashal that the end will also end up with you. The far is Rashi medayik, and that's why Rashi specifically says the words v'achris elavid b'yodom. V'achris in his end. So Rashi says no. Rashi says beferish that he'll get lost in their hands. V'achris is v'an oisfir inyan for Rashis. His end concludes the beginning. As a Balak is given the Rashis, the Mulchama. He was the first to wage war. So I'm following of the Yidden to attack the Yidden. But Zain Achris, what's going to be his end? Zain le'ovet biyodum b'mulchama, that he is going to get lost by the Yidden Mulchama. So the biyodum b'mulchama is just to continue the same context of the moshul that we're giving over here, that the Rashis is a moshul and the Achris is a moshul, the beginning with the wars and the end of the war. This is all the moshul and all with relationship to Yidden, that he started off with Yidden and the Yidden will end the war with him. In Ois Ches, the Rebbe explains based on this very geschmack the Yeina Shul Torah.